Thomas Fleming, welcome to our live. Thomas Fleming says, hi, thanks for all your videos. You're very welcome, Thomas. Thank you for attending our live today. Thomas Fleming has a question. If I buy a property off plan with a deposit and then monthly installments until the property is built, will this still qualify for the property investment visa or does it need to be a lump sum? So there are two major requirements for the residency visa when it comes to buying off-plan properties. And for those who don't know what an off-plan property is, it means you are buying in the early stages. There is no building, there is no property, but there is a plan, right? So that's the concept of off-plan. You're buying at the inception of the development. And the advantage of buying such properties is that you're going to usually get a better price than if the property is already built, right? And the reasoning for that is because you are taking on a certain risk. You are trusting that the developer is going to deliver what you're paying for. And historically, particularly when you are working with reputable developers who have been for many years, ideally many decades in business, chances are you're going to get what you're paying for. But anyhow, nowadays with the possibility of a world war and other international events, it's never guaranteed, right? So you have a pretty high chance that you're going to get a property, but of course, it's never guaranteed. For instance, if the developer goes under, the government is not going to, help you with any type of compensation. You basically, maybe you're going to get a fraction of the assets if the developer has separate assets for the development. But I think you got the idea, right? Like, I mean, you get a better pricing in exchange of assuming some degree of risk. Now, answering your question, off-plan properties, they would still qualify for the residency investment visa as long as they are able first to provide the incorporation and the construction license paperwork. From our experience, to obtain a construction license is pretty straightforward, and I would say even easy for someone who's in the business of developing buildings, developing apartment buildings. However, the incorporation paperwork is much more difficult to obtain. Okay, so if you are buying in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, and you're buying from a traditional developer, chances are the developer is going to have the incorporation papers, and those two things alone would qualify the property, even though the property is not ready. This property would still qualify for the residency visa. Now, on the payment side, however, you're not going to qualify until you pay the minimum amount. So again, in our example, if you're buying an apartment in Rio de Janeiro, the minimum amount as of today is going to be 1 million reais. Okay, so if you're buying this property and you're paying like 20% down payment, you're paying 200 thousand reais, and then you're gonna pay the 800,000 in installments. So this is not gonna qualify for the visa because if you think, from the government perspective, there is no guarantee that you're gonna actually pay the 800,000. There may be a contract. Of course, you are interested in paying off the property, but just like everything else in life, there is no guarantee that you're going to follow through. So the government, of course, they don't want to be in this type of situation where they give you the residency and maybe later on you don't fulfill your side of the bargain. So they are not going to give you the residency until you pay the 1 million reais. Now, if you're buying a 2 million reais property and your down payment is going to be for 1 million reais, and the second million you're going to finance, that's absolutely fine because just the down payment alone would fulfill the minimum requirement. All right, Thomas, I hope that was helpful. All right, Thomas. Thomas says thanks. That was very helpful. My pleasure, Thomas. And if you have more questions, keep them coming. Tim Edwards, welcome, Tim. Tim Edwards is asking, can I open a bank account in Brazil, then pay into it money to buy an apartment in Brazil, and then having paid from my Brazil bank account for the house, would this be okay to qualify for the visa? So there are a few challenges there, team. The first challenge is to actually open the bank account. Brazil historically, is always going to prefer a complexity over simplicity. It's just a trait of our culture, and this is pretty ingrained in our government procedures and consequently in the Brazilian central bank requirements for commercial banks operating in Brazil. So if you go to a bank, right, if you show your passport, they are going to say, listen, you're not a resident, therefore I'm not going to be able to open a bank account. I like to say that in 98% of the cases, a foreign citizen is not going to be able to open a bank account in Brazil unless you have some type of immigration benefit in the country. There are some exceptions. For instance, if you are married to a Brazilian citizen, it may be possible for you guys to open a joint bank account where the Brazilian citizen is going to be the leading account holder and you would kind of piggyback on the Brazilian citizen. Okay, so that's an exception. But the usual answer is no, you're not able to open the bank account. So that's the first challenge. The second one, when you go by the law, right? Like there is a specific law. In Portuguese, we call resolução normativa, which would roughly translate as a regulation. So it's not actually a law, but it's it's a series of rules from the Brazilian federal government, right? So it's not coming from the legislative; it's coming from the government itself. And when you go by these rules, it basically says that the money should be sent from abroad for the acquisition of real estate. And when you send the money into the country to buy real estate, there is a specific track that the Brazilian central bank is going to expect commercial banks to follow, and it works like this. If you send the money to buy real estate, you should not send the money to yourself because, again, per the Brazilian central bank understanding, if you're buying a property, you're not sending money to yourself, you're sending the money to the seller, right? So, as a consequence, you could maybe, steal, for instance, in the example, like if you have a Brazilian spouse, you're able to open a bank account and then you send the money to buy real estate to your bank account instead of the seller. The problem here is that the bank handling the currency exchange, remember, you never send the money to Brazil and expect the money to show up in the target bank account. That's not how it works. Whenever you send more than $10,000, this money is going to be actually locked in a compliance procedure. And until you provided the paperwork and explanation about why this money is coming into Brazil, this money is not going to show up at all, right? You're just going to be, well, where's the money? And then you need to check with the bank manager. Bank manager is going to contact the currency exchange department. And you see the drill, right? Like it takes some time for this money to materialize. But when you send in the money to yourself, the currency exchange bank or the bank, it could be a commercial bank or it could be a currency exchange specializing bank. It doesn't matter. This bank is going to need to handle a compliance. And when they are handling a compliance, they are going to need to tag this money to explain why the money came into the country. And if you send it to yourself, most probably they are going to say that this is availability money. Okay, availability money is actually a technical term from a currency exchange perspective, meaning that you happen to have money abroad and you happen to have a Brazilian bank account and you're sending money to yourself because you have money available. Okay, but here is the problem. One of the things you need to present when you are applying for the real estate investment visa in Brazil is the currency exchange paperwork. So when you deliver the currency exchange paperwork, what the immigration analyst is going to see, it's going to see like money coming from yourself to yourself, right? It's coming from you abroad to you in Brazil. And this money is going to be tagged. There's going to be a specific field in the contract, in the currency exchange contract, saying that this money was sent for availability and not for purchase of real estate. So because of this distinction, there is a substantial chance that your application is not going to be approved. Okay, that's the straightforward answer, is that you have a high risk of having your application declined because you didn't send the money as it should have been sent. Now, just to offer another perspective, it's also interesting that it was during this current year we had some clients that bought exactly like you are suggesting, right? So they sent money, they had the money abroad, they sent money to their bank account in Brazil. And from this bank account in Brazil, they paid the seller. And when they asked us, like they completed the real estate transaction and all of that before hiring us. And they came to us basically saying, listen, we know that we kind of mess it up in terms of sending the money. but we already spent, we bought the property, we want to apply for the real estate investment visa anyhow. So we told them very clearly, listen, there is a, like the this is probably going to be denied, right? Like if you want us to hire, if you want to hire us for the application, we could still try, and this is going to be a long shot. And long story short, the visa was actually approved, was approved for both applicants, right? So at the same time that we are saying that this is not the correct way of doing it, we have actually here at the firm a case where the clients were able to get the residency visa, right? But they did hire our services when we are applying for the visa. We actually get a power of attorney in place. We present our credentials. We kind of record ourselves as the attorney of records for the applicant. And we believe that this may type of, like help with the application, since everything else was perfect, was in good shape. Maybe the applicant said, all right, like they retained a law firm, they did take care of other things. The deed was showing the applicants as the buyers. And at the end of the day, it was successful. But if you are asking us for advisory, we're going to tell you, don't do that. You need to send the payment directly to the seller. Of course, there's going to be an approach to do that. You're not just going to send the money, to the seller and hope things are going to work. So usually when we are working with a client, we're going to try to emulate an escrow in order for the seller to receive your funds, your money, only on the day of the closing. This way, we are mitigating the chances that the seller is going to receive your money and eventually not sign the transfer deeds. Team Edwards, okay, thanks very much. You're welcome, team. We also have here D. Gibbs. Definitely appreciate all your knowledge, and hopefully we can do business in the future. Of course, Gibbs, we're going to be more than happy to assist you. And feel free, if you have like a transaction in the works, to schedule a consultation where we can review the specifics. Much of our consultations, they are done like using Zoom, actually most of the consultations, and we can, actually share a lot of information, do like screen sharing. We can review your paperwork, and usually you're gonna get, a very thorough check on your planning. This way you can adjust your plan if necessary and take from there. All right, Gibbs has a question for us. What do you think is the best state for foreigners to purchase property in? Gibbs, we do receive such questions a lot, and it really depends on on the preference of the buyer, right, or the purpose of the purchase as well. So if people are just looking for an investment and maybe they want to get the residency visa through the purchase, our top recommendations would be Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo, because they are, in my opinion, the most traditional real estate markets for foreign citizens in Brazil. There is a close third place that's going to be Florianopolis in Santa Catarina, right in the south of the country. And another contender, another close contender would come in fourth. It's going to be the northeast of Brazil. The northeast of Brazil, is also highly sought by foreign citizens. I particularly love, the state of Ceará. I also like the state of Bahia a lot. There is Rio Grande do Norte, also pretty famous with foreign citizens. So it really depends on what you're looking for. One distinction that I think it does help you, assuage your concerns in terms of location is that when, let's say, if you're buying the property with the goal of getting the Brazilian residency. It really doesn't matter where you buy because you could buy and then rent this property, and this is going to satisfy the requirements for the Brazil real estate investment visa. Okay, so there is no need for you to actually live in the property that you're buying. You could very well buy this property and then rent this property out. And with this income and other income that you have, you could travel Brazil and kind of explore the different areas and decide if you want to settle or where you want to settle, right? Pretty recently, we had a client from the US. She's an attorney, and she bought a couple of properties in Sao Paulo. But whenever she goes to Brazil, she comes to Brazil, she's going to be all over the place. She's going to enjoy herself, travel to different states, and really have a great time in Brazil. But she chose to buy the two properties in Sao Paulo, right? And she needed us to do the management. And usually, when we are doing the management of the property for our clients, we're going to be doing that either in Rio de Janeiro or Sao Paulo, because that's where we have our main offices. So we have like enough personnel. For instance, if you needed to change the names on the accounts, like electricity, the condo fees, you need to get internet, and other things. So in Brazil, just like everything else, these things, they are bureaucratic, right? There is a lot of red tape. So, an example, like to change the electricity bill in São Paulo or Rio de Janeiro, like you need a POF attorney. And on top of that, they are going to make you go physically to electricity company, one of the many offices they have in the city, like to take such requests. So it's really, time consuming, and we would not be able to do that in different cities. So whenever we have people, listen, I want to buy a property, I want you to, like manage this property later on. We're going to say, listen, if that's the case, you got to either buy in Rio de Janeiro or São Paulo. Now, if you buy in a different place, of course, there's going to be some type of management service offer. We usually try to avoid like recommending a service because you never know if the service is going to be provided at the foreign citizens' expectations, right? Particularly when people are using our services, like we have like a very thorough communication. We are very careful. Like we really go, the extra mile to have our clients satisfied. And then if we recommend or share, if you're sharing someone's contact information, you are kind of vouching for the services. And unfortunately, I would say most, real estate management companies, they are not going to spend a lot of time, answering questions that you have, like we usually do with our clients, or just like we are doing right now. So I think, sometimes because of the way we work, we create a certain unrealistic expectation in our clients in terms of what services would be in Brazil. And therefore, we avoid sharing, management companies' names and numbers. But there is a bunch. I would say that in every, capital or every major or, like of certain size city in Brazil, you're going to find a company willing to manage your property for a fee. Z Gibbs says, thank you very much for information. Continue to tuning in for the knowledge. You're welcome, Gibbs. And for you to know, and everyone else, we are now scheduling our live streams for Wednesdays and Sundays. So Sunday we're scheduling for 3:30 Rio de Janeiro time, and for Wednesday we are scheduling for 11:30 in the morning, of course, Rio de Janeiro time, right? So as you process your information, as you plan ahead, you have this option of coming back here to our channel on either Wednesday or Sunday, and participating in our lives just like you're doing right now. Right. Thomas Fleming has a question for us. You previously mentioned that foreigners needed 4 years temporary residency plus 4 years permanent residency before being eligible for citizenship. Later, you mentioned achieving citizenship in 4 years. That's a good question, Thomas. And so there is a discrepancy in terms of the immigration legislation in the country. And this, like there is no position from the Brazilian immigration on that front. However, we see as a more consistent approach that the Brazilian immigration is going to accept a citizenship application for foreign citizens who have been living under residency in Brazil for 4 years. And just like immigration elsewhere, right? Like I mean, for instance, if you think about immigration in the U.S., there is a large number of sources for immigration laws, rules, procedures, and interpretation. And they are not always completely harmonic to each other. So that's exactly what happens here. Like if you take a look at how the Brazil real estate investment visa works, if you take a look at the Resolução Normativa or the regulation that supports, that allows this visa or this residency to exist, it says like this. First, you're going to get 4 years of temporary residency. And after 4 years of temporary residency, you're going to be kind of upgraded to the permanent residency, right? And it is like our understanding that the intentions of the Brazilian government is to give the citizenship only to those who have like permanent residency and not to those who have only or just a temporary residency. Okay, there are pages in the Brazil government immigration workflow where they clearly say that only permanent residency should be enough grounds for someone to apply for the citizenship, right? So This is what it should really, that's how it should really work. However, there is a type of law that is called like the law of the immigrant in Brazil, which basically says that those who have been living uh, in Brazil for 4 years, that they are going to qualify for the citizenship application, right? So it looks like the immigration analysts, they are, when they are reviewing the applications for the residency, they are basically looking at the law, the lei do imigrante, or the law of the immigrant in Brazil, and they are looking at someone who has been living legally in Brazil for 4 years in order to grant the residency, right? So, the bottom line is like this. If you ask me today, all right, so if I hire to apply for my residency, am I going to get or not? And then my answer to you, Thomas, is going to be like this. Listen, it's worth a shot. And based on our experience, most probably than not, you're gonna get the citizenship if you've been living in Brazil under the investment visa for 4 years. However, it's also possible that you're not gonna get the citizenship. That they're gonna say, well, you're just living under a temporary residency, and therefore you don't qualify for applying for the citizenship. But most of the information we have here at the firm indicates that the preferred interpretation from the Brazilian immigration is that as long as you've been living 4 years under the Brazil real estate investment visa, even if it's just like the first 4 years, they are going to have this more lenient reading of the lei da imigração, or the law of the immigrant, and they are going to, allow you to get the citizenship, as long as, of course, you do meet the other requirements. All right, Thomas, can you clarify your latest understanding of the path to citizenship? So yes, that's what I just told you. Like, whenever we have people applying, and that's just like the other example I mentioned earlier on. Whenever we think, like there is not enough a basis for someone to apply for a benefit, we kind of, like we disclaim our responsibility for the results. We say, listen, this is going to be on attempt, right? Like there is no guarantee. In our understanding, it does not narrowly meet the immigration requirements, and basically you taking the chances, okay? And if it works, that's great, and if it doesn't work, you know that as soon as you get the permanent residency, that's, let's say, at least from this more conservative interpretation, that's going to be the correct moment for you to apply for the Brazil citizenship. All right, we have another question from D. Gibbs. I'm coming in January and I plan on staying for 6 months. Do you think I will get an extension uh, for stay past 90 days? That's uh, that's an interesting question. We had the same question in a consultation this week, and particularly because most of our clients, they for the immigration, they are either in Rio de Janeiro or São Paulo. We have this a pretty settled understanding that you're gonna get it, okay? Because in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, is more like a pro forma application. So you basically go to the website. If you just search for extend my stay in Portuguese, you're gonna see this website from the Brazilian government. They make it pretty easy for you to apply for the extension. You're gonna pay a fee that you know for the vast majority of applicants, they don't have an account in Brazil, so they need to go physically to Banco do Brasil. Okay, that's the only bank that's going to accept payment for the extension application, and then you're going to schedule an interview to go in person to Polícia Federal, right, to the Federal Police of Brazil to get your extension. Okay, now it may be something new coming from the new administration, but uh, we hear some some people saying that they are having a hard time at the application for the extension. Okay, so I would say that historically it's more just like a pro forma procedure. You're going to go over there to have this thing rubber stamped as long as you follow the steps. But nowadays we hear from some people that like the analyst or the officer is going to say, well, why do you need an extension? What happened, right? Like you should provide uh, some type of explanation, right? Like, I mean, I missed my flight, or I don't know, I got sick and I need some time here in the country before leaving the country. So there may be a change in procedure happening as we speak. But my answer is at least for Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, like the 90-day extension is almost automatic. Okay, it's not something that you're gonna need to, you know, like I used to say, you're not gonna need to tell a sad story to get it. It's something almost like they're gonna rubber stamp. Now, giving such notice of some people, getting a hard time from the immigration, you may also have, a an explanation, right? And an explanation like if you're planning to buy a property, you could really, very well say, listen, I came here to stay 3 months. I'm looking for a property to purchase. I still couldn't find, so I needed an additional 3 months because then I'm going to find the property, I'm going to buy the property, and then I'm going to apply for the real estate investment visa eventually, right? Um, but maybe you just apply and say, listen, I need to stay more time. I came here, for 3 months, and I happen to want to stay more, and I'm here playing by the rules, right? And I think that should be sufficient for you to get the additional 90 days. Now, this said, just remember, I told you a few minutes ago, there is a new administration, and uh, uh, they may be changing things as we speak, right? Like they just changed the waiver for U.S. citizens, right? Like starting in the President Bolsonaro administration, there was a waiver in saying that U.S. citizens and Canadians they would not need a visa when visiting Brazil anymore. And the reasoning behind that is because, like usually US citizens, Canadian citizens, they're going to spend a lot of money in the country, and we should make it easier for them to visit Brazil, not more difficult, right? That was the reasoning from the previous administration. The current administration said, that's not how we see this matter. We actually think that there should be reciprocity. So if the U.S. makes difficult for Brazilian citizens to travel to the U.S., we also gonna, have some level of red tape for U.S. citizens to come to Brazil, and therefore, starting on January the 10th, right, January the 10th of 2024, in order for U.S. citizens to fly into Brazil, they are going to need a visa, okay, issued by either a Brazilian consulate or a Brazilian embassy abroad, right? Otherwise, you can't enter Brazil. And a lot of people, they say, well, it doesn't sound very smart. It's really a matter of, like your take on this situation. Most of the criticism on the current administration is that, it's not really about reciprocity because, like U.S. citizens, they come illegally into Brazil, and there are so many Brazilians, unfortunately, crossing the borders into the U.S. illegally, right? So I also understand that the U.S. Side of things, like, we're not asking for a visa to make your life harder. We are just asking, for visas, because if we don't, maybe we're going to have like millions of Brazilians coming into the U.S., not to travel and spend money, but to stay in the U.S. for good. So that's the take on the situation. All right, we got another question from Teen Edwards. You advise not paying the seller until the last minute. Is it common in Brazil when you pay the seller too early that they are gonna pull out or somehow disappear with your money, right? So our advice, to of course pay at the last minute is just because life happens, right? And once you have enough transactions, under your belt, you're gonna see some, concerning or maybe crazy things. And if you pay the seller too soon, maybe the seller could get involved in a car crash. The seller could have a heart attack. Maybe the sellers are married and they decided to divorce, like in the middle of your transaction. And if any of those things happen, even if the seller, because like when you are getting into the transaction, particularly if you have some level of advisory, your attorney is going to review, is going to see if the seller has like criminal records, is going to see if the property has a proper deed, and like there's a bunch of due diligence steps we take. So it's pretty difficult for the seller to disappear, right? Or to say, well, I changed my mind now, your money's in my pocket, I'm not going to sign the deed. That's kind of difficult, but that's not how things usually happen, right? They're usually going to be the seller had a heart attack and therefore he's not going to close anymore and his priorities are going to be completely different than yours, and you're going to need to chase this person, right, to have this property title transferred to you. Or maybe the sellers, they start a divorce in the middle of the procedure, and then again their priority is going to be elsewhere. And there is a type of lawsuit in Brazil that's specifically designed to force the transfer of title by showing that you paid the full price, that there was a contract, and so on. So even if the seller doesn't sign the transfer deed, in theory, you would still have this type of remedy, right, to sue for a judge to transfer forcedly the title. Now, the problem in Brazil is that, like a typical lawsuit could easily take over a decade, and it's not uncommon for lawsuits to last a few decades, right? So as we speak, there are a couple of cases here at the firm that is taking just to serve the process, just for the citation, is taking us over a year, right? Because of course, like I mean, the defendant is like hiding, is playing games, and we need to keep chasing the defendant. So I would say you don't want to be in this type of situation of taking the chances. That's why we believe very strongly in not letting the seller get your money into their pocket until the last minute, right? Because if they get the payment on the day of the closing, when they are attending a closing in a registry, in a cartório, the day before, you went to the property, you see that the property is vacant, there is no one living there, that the sellers are prepared to hand over the possession. That's how we, conduct our real estate transactions here at the firm. However, in Brazil, particularly if you have, like the funds in your account, and that could be a same-day transfer, most of the buyers, they are just gonna, interpret that this is how things are done in Brazil, and there is no much, there's no plan B, right? There's no escrow accounts in Brazil. Just just to compare, like in the US, you have the title companies. They offer both a title insurance, meaning if you're buying a property from someone who doesn't have the legal right to sell, you're going to be refunded, right? Let's say if 1 year down the road, you find out that the person selling, maybe they got this property, but they were not the correct seller for some defect in the paperwork. Maybe there was a fraudulent sale, deed of sale in the chain of ownership. And in the US, like you are reimbursed because there is title insurance for basically most transactions. The same entity providing the title insurance, they also provided the escrow account. So that means you're going to send your money to this reputable title company, and they are going to park your money, and they are not going to release it to the seller until the seller has properly signed the deed of sale. But unfortunately, we don't have such a thing in Brazil. Like if you ask Brazilians, particularly realtors or people who are not really, don't understand the legal side of things, they are going to look at you puzzled, like, what are you talking about? Rescue account, right? What is that, right? They don't even know what it is. And that's why, many of our clients, when they come to us, they say, listen, I understand that the chance that the seller is not going to transfer me the title is small, but I happen to not want to run this small risk. Okay. And I'm going to make another analogy, like a lot of people say, well, do I really need the services of a lawyer, right? Like how are my chances of buying successfully a property in Brazil? And if I had to guess, I would say that the majority of transactions, they are going to happen just fine, right? Like, I mean, I'm not saying that if you don't hire a lawyer, you're going to lose your money. We never said that to anyone. However, uh, there is going to be a percentage of transactions that are going to end up in either lawsuits or the buyer basically losing everything. Yes, there is a percentage, right? So there are no statistics, unfortunately. So we are unable to tell you, listen, 90% of the transactions go fine and 10% do not go fine, or it's 80% that's going to be just fine and 20 are going to get entangled in these type of situations. The point is, some people, they don't want to take a risk, right? Like, I mean, it's pretty common, particularly for our clients in the West, like when they are going to buy a house in Brazil, they are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And they say, listen, it took me, I don't know, like a decade, to kind of save this money. And I want to take zero chances of losing this money, right? Although, even with an attorney, your chances are never going to be zero, but they are substantially higher in terms of, success, and you're going to reduce the chances of loss dramatically when you have a bilingual attorney who understands your language, can explain the concepts in your language, and can provide this type of we emulate the escrow. Like we don't provide an escrow; it's not a real escrow account, but we do assist our clients to time the release of the money, which I think it's one of the most important aspects of how to have a safe translation as a foreign citizen buying real estate in Brazil. All right, guys, we are about 6 minutes from ending our live stream. If you have a final question, I'm going to be happy to take it. D. Gibbs says thank you. You're welcome, Gibbs, and feel free to come back for our other lives. As we were saying, our lives are going to happen on Wednesdays and Sundays. On Wednesdays, we're going to meet at 11:30 in the morning, Rio de Janeiro time, and on Sunday, we're going to meet at 3:30 in the afternoon, right? If you are used to Brazilian time, we're talking about 15 and 30, okay? 3:30 or 15 and 30 on Sundays. So if you didn't think about a question today, you want to come back for our next live streams, you're pretty welcome to do so. The same for Gibbs, Tim Edwards, Thomas Fleming, and everybody who has participated in one of our prior live streams. All right. Thank you, everyone, for participating. See you on Wednesday and have a great week ahead.